Okie dokie. All right, guys. So, welcome to today's show. We have a few things prepared for you. We're going to talk about the Medicare for All March, which we had participated, both of us, Keith and I, in our respective locations.
East Coast, West Coast.
Yeah, it was 55 cities across the U.S. No mainstream media coverage, of course. Zero participation from our squad members or politicians, aside from maybe a tweet or a statement that was provided by Cory Bush, I believe. Other than that, it was nothing. We had people like Susan Sarandon and Williams. What's her name?
Marianne Williams,
who participated in the Washington parade. For us, this was the first. For me, it was the first time live streaming with the field equipment. And that seemed to have gone pretty well. So I assume there will be more of that. Our uphill media needed the platform for other organizing purposes at that time, so the streaming was done on my own channel, the Progressive Update. You're welcome to check it out. It was the entire march in New Jersey, Newark, New Jersey. There were some really good speakers, and we'll have a little bit of an excerpt from a witness, from someone who was sharing their account of what their experience with the insurance companies was.
But Amos, how many people were there at your march?
Well, there were about, I would say about 200 at any point. It's still small. We need to get many more people out. I hope that if you were considering participating next time, you'll definitely participate. We really need a grassroots movement out there to push politicians, and they're not. They have so far not been involved. Like none of them. So we really need to keep pushing. I believe the next step is going to be to appeal to the UN and file a complaint against the US because this is a human rights issue.
Absolutely.
We consider
healthcare is a human right, and that's the one thing. I'm interrupting you right here, but I went to my march, and that's what people got to understand. Is maybe they'd get it right on a multiple choice test or something, but the standard attitude is that no, people don't really understand that in America, and it's really sad in my point of view. I want people to know that healthcare is a human right.
Yep, that's absolutely true. So until we get the politicians to step up, we're going to have to keep organizing bigger and bigger events, standing in front of their offices. And it's not always the most appealing thing to do or the best thing you can imagine for spending a weekend day, but it is absolutely necessary at this point. Let's see what else we have covered in the show. We have a segment about the fossil fuel industry, the fracking industry, and how it's orienting itself now to create a ton of waste of plastic, and that is something that people are not yet quite fully aware of. Most people are not aware that this is the plan for the future, as there's a further crackdown on the use of fossil fuel for power generation and transportation. They need a stable long-term use for their product, and that turns out to be plastics. We've seen in the interview that was leaked from the ExxonMobil individual executive that they were also involved in forever chemicals, which are these chemicals portrayed in the Dark Water movie, highly toxic chemicals that completely poison entire areas. They get into groundwater, and they're doubling down on that industry as well as plastics. We already have seas of plastic. We have huge environmental damage from it, not to mention people suffering from the production of it, and we'll cover this a little bit as well. But that's a complete difficult situation to solve. So that is one thing. We also will cover another victim of the dysfunctional healthcare system, Kaloni Bolton, who's a little girl who passed away due to the way our healthcare system is delivered. To remind you, if you wish to talk to us on Twitter directly, just use this hashtag UHM, that's Uphill Media, no joke. There's one extra hashtag by mistake here. I just noticed it. All right, so let's watch this little clip from Now This, and we'll discuss that once on the other end.
I love Now This.
This is my official petition to relabel plastic fracked plastic. Right now, hundreds of millions of people are taking part in Plastic Free July, a commitment to say no to single-use plastic items for a whole month. And recently, more nations than ever have proposed legislation to stem the flow of plastic production and ban certain single-use plastics. But at the same time, petrochemical companies that make plastic are investing billions of dollars in new factories. And the World Economic Forum predicts plastic production will double in the next 20 years. So where is the disconnect? Why is the plastics industry doubling down when more people than ever are trying to prevent its growth?
The fracking boom in the last decade and a half in the United States has made the U.S. into an important player when it comes to energy. And it's also turning the U.S. into an important player when it comes to plastic.
That's right. The predicted growth of plastic in the U.S. is directly connected to the fracking boom. In this week's episode, I'll talk to author and journalist Beth Gardner, who has documented the connection between fracking and plastic production.
When you pull gas and oil out of the ground with these fracking wells, and whether it's in the Ohio River Valley or down in Texas or out in other parts of the country, you also get a substance known as ethane. And it's helping to keep a lot of fracking companies afloat and a lot of fracking wells running that might well otherwise have closed. The infrastructure to turn that ethane into plastic has expanded.
As well as Jill Hunkler, a seventh-generation Ohio Valley resident who had to leave her home after fracking wells made her family sick.
At first, you would notice a burning in your nose, and then headaches and terrible neck aches, nausea. I was forced from my home due to the air pollution from 78 fracking wells, a compressor station that had been in significant and ongoing violations of the Clean Air Act and the Ohio Pollution Control Act for years, pipelines, transfer stations, all within a 5-mile radius of my home.
I'm Lucy Biggers, and this is One Small Step. Fracking is short for hydraulic fracturing, the process of getting natural gas and oil out of sedimentary rock called shale. Fracking wells are built to blast large amounts of water, chemicals, and sand deep underground into the shale, causing it to fracture and release trapped natural gas and oil. The oil and gas is then piped up to the surface and sent to a plant to be used in homes and industry. The water, which is now contaminated with chemicals and radioactive materials present in the shale, also rises to the surface and must be sent to a treatment facility or stored underground in a new injection well. Wastewater and backflow from fracking adds up to 1 trillion gallons a year. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, between 2000 and 2015, fracking wells in the United States increased by 1,204%, from 23,000 wells to over 300,000. The fracking industry claims their process is safe and has a lower carbon footprint than coal, but evidence shows that fracking has serious health impacts. Living near fracking wells causes people to develop respiratory issues and problems during pregnancy, as well as risk of exposure to contaminated drinking water and radioactive waste. Think about it. Fracking is sending serious amounts of pressure deep into the earth to disrupt rock, releasing natural gas, chemicals, and radioactive material that have settled into the Earth's core. Fracking wells bring all that stuff up to the surface, posing a serious threat to human health. And Jill had 78 fracking wells within 5 miles of her home.
We never knew what we would find when we would get home. You know, they might be fracking on the hill and you'd see the red glow, and then as soon as you would get there, we'd start having headaches and sinus issues and neck pain, and then it would be so bad sometimes we would just leave and go stay with family and about 20 miles, 15 miles away. Then the symptoms would subside, within an hour or so after leaving the property.
As fracking has increased, so has investment in petrochemical plants that turn ethane into plastic.
It is fair to say that the petrochemical industry, which is plastic is, one of their main products, has been spending a tremendous amount of money, somewhere over $200 billion in the last sort of 10 or so years, just in the United States, to expand their capacity to produce more petrochemicals.
Beth Gardner is a journalist and author of Choked: Life and Death in the Age of Air Pollution.
The availability of cheap ethane from the fracking boom all across the country is driving this build out. And then the existence of the facilities sort of as a pull factor drives the production of more ethane. So it's kind of a cycle there.
And the environmental impacts don't end at the fracking well. Once ethane is collected from fracking, it's sent to a cracker plant.
So an ethane cracker is an absolutely enormous facility that uses a tremendous amount of energy it's called crack the ethane molecules into ethylene and then turn them into these tiny little plastic pellets. They're known as nurdles, about the size of a lentil, that then get shipped to companies, manufacturers that are making stuff out of plastic. Any place that has a big plastic production capacity is going to have waters that are filled with these tiny nurdles, and they're really dangerous to sea life. Birds and fish can eat them, and then they starve because they think that they've eaten, but they haven't actually.
You may recognize nurdles from a recent cargo ship accident off the coast of Sri Lanka. The Express Pearl, carrying chemicals and plastic raw materials, exploded, releasing tons of plastic nurdles into the ocean. Dead fish have since washed ashore with nurdles stuck in their gills. Scientists say health and environmental impacts could last for decades. Cracking ethane into ethylene also carries a huge carbon footprint. According to one report, the carbon emissions from the cracking of ethane and an alternative ingredient called naphtha were equivalent to 52 coal-fired power plants in 2015. And that footprint could reach the equivalent of 69 coal plants by 2030 if the industry continues to expand.
Wow. So you could see how multifaceted this problem is. Just sticking to fossil fuels is just a bad idea all around. It's like it's creating sick and dead people at the production sites, at the fracking sites, at the plastic generation sites, and we'll get into that in a little bit. It's using up even more energy, so we have to burn energy to get these stupid plastics to be made.
That's why she mentioned the carbon footprint of the production of the ethane, or splitting it down, because when you split it, you're not actually releasing anything, but it's going to take heat to do it. So
exactly,
that's where it's being released.
Exactly. Here's this is how this whole thing looks, basically. So you have things at every stage that are contributing. So what we need to do to break free from plastic pollution, there's an act in Congress being promoted now. There was previous versions of it in 2020 and before, but currently there is one that is hopefully going to get a bit more attention, and we have to make sure that it does. Otherwise, we'll keep going in perpetuity into this abyss. So there's definitely things that can be done, and this slides just shows you there is. There's
right. Well, Amos, you brought this one, so you know more about this bill and everything. But I do know a lot about the background, and boy, it is a complicated issue. One thing about it is where are we going to get plastic if we don't frack? Because the truth is, about 20 years ago, well, 15 years ago, I got a copy of this, and in that documentary, 15 years ago, basically, our country had run out of naturally occurring natural gas, which was the feedstock for our plastics industry. And that means that the only place in America we can really get the raw material to even make plastic the way it's made now, and it shouldn't be made this way now because this is a complicated issue. It ought to come from other sources, but that's really getting complicated. The fact is, right now, the only place in America it's going to come from is fracking. And so what are you going to do? You're going to have to, we have to regulate it. We have to make sure, emissions are kept to a minimum, perhaps tax it so that a minimum amount of plastics actually produced. Absolutely get rid of single-use plastics. And in watching this report, it's obvious to me that the petroleum industry, acting in their capitalistic manner, are centered around profit as everything else in America, and it's causing some very bad decisions to be made. And basically, it's going to kill us. If through the pollution or by not preparing for the end, which is going to be just as bad. When that brick wall comes in, and a piece of plastic costs $100, guess what?
Well, plastics, we've covered plastic pollution in the show previously, and it's a huge problem. Plastics are a disaster for the environment, like a purely disaster. And the only way to mitigate is just to get away from plastics. Replace plastic wherever possible with other materials, with renewable materials. Recycling is barely a solution, because first of all, it takes a lot of energy. It can be only recycled once or so, and they create materials that then they have to be dumped and cause environmental pollution. So it's not the whole premise of recycling. It can reduce the impact, but it can certainly not solve the impact. And well,
there is one form of recycling that could actually get rid of all the plastic, and that is if you had a mandatory recycling program where you had to turn old plastic in, and it went into a where it was turned into oil. And that oil, we're against fossil fuels, right? So, but this could actually be done. And, we could argue about whether that oil should be used to make more plastic or new plastic, or maybe pumped it back into the ground. I'm kidding about that. But the fact is, plastic is made out of oil, and plastic can be turned right back into oil. You can get on YouTube, and there are people who have done this. About 20 years ago, it was kind of a big deal, and I was interested in doing it myself. I had a friend who kind of set me straight and reminded me that, the operating your own refinery is kind of a federal offense, and you can get in really big trouble for doing it. But I was just a hobby project, because I'm a kind of science nerd that way. But yeah, if you take plastic, you put it into a metal container, and you heat it up in the presence of no air. Perhaps you suck out the air before you even start heating it up, and when it gets hot, that plastic starts to crack, and this cracking is identical to the concept of cracking in any petrochemical plant. It's the woman in the tape mentioned that splitting the ethylene had a carbon footprint, because you always have energy running these plants. But basically, that's what's going on. You've got your long chain, your chains of hydrocarbon molecules of varying lengths, which produce different products. And by heat and distillations, you can get all sorts of things with enough energy put into it. So, basically we've got a situation where things are unregulated, and capitalism is continuing to make decisions by a small number of people that are not in the public interest. And how long are people going to put up with it? I don't have an answer.
And I don't know about the what you raised regarding recycling into oil, whether it's feasible from the energy standpoint. If you put in more energy than you're getting out, it may not be. But either way, I think it's not. It's, to me, this is not just a regulation issue. It's actually really plastic is a problematic substance, and we by using plastics, we give more, we feed the industry as in terms of extracting oil, and we need to stop extracting oil. We don't want to keep extracting oil. That is actually we're making it possible by using plastics. Even if we will crack down on the use of oil for power generation, this is going to keep fueling that extraction, and it's not in our advantage. It's not in the advantage of the environment. So that's in my opinion. We need to crack down on use of plastics altogether.
Pun intended.
There were, as I mentioned, there are a couple of bills, one in Senate, one in Congress. The one in Senate was introduced by Senator Jeff Markley, which so far have done quite a nice job in terms of bringing up sponsoring progressive bills. We mentioned him also in a previous show regarding another act in Congress, in Senate. Here we had in Senate we had the following people co-sponsor. Some of them may surprise you, some of them would not: Wyden, Warren, Sanders, Booker, Durbin, Markey, Blumenthal, Leahy, Gillibrand, Feinstein, and that really surprised me to see Feinstein on that list, Murray, and Van Hollen. So those people supported the bill. It's yet unknown. They haven't really estimated what's the chances of it passing. In the House, however, they introduced a bill. Representative Lowenthal, Democrats from 47th District in California, and we had sponsorship of 105 all Democrats. Noteworthy among those was people who supported it, who sponsored it. Among them were Wasserman Schultz, which to me was a surprise. DeFazio in Oregon, if you know his positions and his reliance of fossil fuel industry, or I think transportation industry more so. That's kind of surprising. And Raskin, who I am starting to appreciate as a strong progressive in various areas, he's shown to be supporting without the labels. AOC, however, not on this bill. So basically there's independent organizations that are assessing the likelihood of certain bills passing. The Congress bill was given 2% chances of passing. Again, all of this is assumed that if we don't have like a grassroots movement that pushes those things, it's not going to move, because the money is pushing in the opposite direction. So we really need to call Congress, call our representatives, and talk about these things often, maybe more than once a year. So that's what I have. Anything else on your end, Keith? Anything you would like to
Yeah, I was
add?
just typing into the chat. I saw a few things there, and I'm going to look into this bill. It's a great, step forward because for what my rant just a few minutes ago, I'm coming from the point of view of recognizing that profit has made all the decisions and they've made very bad decisions. And it's the religion of the land. And until we start acting responsibly towards the environment and passing some carbon dividends, taxes, regulations, whatever we have to do to get a handle on this. Because, if you're expecting the petroleum companies, the boards of directors of corporations to suddenly see the light and start turning into our channel and saying, hey, what can we do next? Guess what? It's never going to happen. They think completely different. They're out for themselves. They think, look, the elites think they can fly somewhere and get away from it all. And that with enough money, you don't have to worry about forever chemicals because you can buy distilled water. And I'm getting ridiculous here, but really, the disconnect between the world they live in and the world we live in is pretty huge, and it's talked about all the time. So yes, and I'm only ranting about that part of it to reemphasize that this is great that something's finally being done. I have to get into this more and find out more about HR 2238, but from what I'm glad you brought this to us.
Well, yeah, but don't count your. I mean, like, don't get too excited yet. It's just an introduced bill. So unless we push it and get it in the public eye, this is not going to go anywhere. It hasn't in the past. So it may be yet another dead bill. We have to make sure that it's not, because our very survival is in stake here. We're being buried literally by these plastics, and if it's going to double instead of shrink to zero, we're in deep trouble. And so write down it's HR 2238 on the House side of it, and it is 984 S984 on the Senate. So if you're calling in, please mention that. All right.
Oh, that's one of my pictures. Yes. Yeah, that I took just after arriving at the Seattle M4A March on last Saturday, and I was just getting oriented. You see a lot of red shirts, and I'll take the opportunity to show you mine. I went to the march, and I got the T-shirt to prove it. So there we go. Yeah, I think that's the side I want to show you.
Nice. Yeah, no, we don't. Okay. We didn't have any T-shirts, but
yeah. Well, that's a pretty important T-shirt because we're going to have an interview on the show with somebody from the organization. I haven't called them yet. I could have. I kind of wanted to, but we haven't had the show. Didn't have the show last week because of the march, and I wanted to, tell you first before just planning what to have on your show without talking to you. But yes. Whole Washington is an initiative to basically bring some kind of health care plan into the state of Washington. I don't know a lot of details. Like a lot of things, I don't know a lot of the details. I just know when things are moving in the right direction or not. And I first found out about it, I think, in July of 2020. I went to a Green Party get together in Bellevue, Washington, and along with 5 other people, which is really sad in the city of like 1 million people. You can only get 6 people to go to a Green Party meeting, get together. And anyway, so I found out about it there. And one thing about that experience is that there was a couple of the women were at the meeting were nurses and involved in whole Washington and telling me about it. And people fall through the cracks all the time in our healthcare system. And that's what we'll be getting into the report about Kaloni Bolton later. She's just one example of many in our local area. And one thing some of the women in whole Washington have done is they've tracked such incidences, and they're keeping track of when what happens is people will try to get medical care, and all your medical care is predicated upon insurance, and so you may be referred off to someone else. And what happens is people in desperate straits who need urgent medical care can find themselves dying, and they can die because they're being sent back and forth between hospitals before they even get seen. And that's unconscionable. But that is an effect of our insurance driven healthcare system, because it's kind of like the petroleum industry, where you've got boards of directors making decisions by small numbers of people in their own interest, supposedly in the public interest, but really in their own interest. And that's what our healthcare system's about. So yeah. And now this slide there, you see Chanda. I did say hi. She's to but I tell you, I went to this thing as a participant. Getting on the way in, I said to myself, all you are is a body to be seen and be counted in this thing. And so I went with the attitude of being a participant and not documenting it, and next time I'll do better. Like, at least I'll remember the names of the speakers and write them down instead of being able to say, oh, yeah, as I will in a few minutes. I don't remember her name. So, going there as participant versus a reporter is a little bit different. And I was totally a participant at this thing. And I kind of gravitate to kind of helping out in these things. Just watching and reporting what's going on is not my thing. I'm more the guy that will, say on the next one, I might bring a bicycle and I would ride along and block the intersections. And as it was in this one, I wound up marching at the front of it, because I'm very tall, actually. I'm 6'3", so they gave me a sign to carry. And so I knew I'd be very effective if I held it up as high as I could, because then I'm over 10 feet tall. And, being next to the front banner at the front of the thing was kind of nice doing that. So, yeah, so this is Chanda. I did say hi. I asked how Oz was doing, but that's about it, and she was very busy, as some other people were they're so busy documenting things, they kind of miss a few things, but that works both ways. So it was good to see her there. This is, that's one of the signs I was carrying. You see the front and back of it there. And yeah, that's the stage. That what happened was, we all gathered at Westlake Park, which is in downtown Seattle, and stayed there, mingled for a bit. And then there were some speakers. And then there was about a 2-mile march down 4th Avenue to the Seattle Center, and where there is an amphitheater. And then there were some more speakers there. But at that point, I had a ride come pick me up, and that was it. The march was essentially over. And then later, this woman, Ashley, I believe her name is, she actually was one of the speakers at the healthcare M4A March. But in this particular photo, I took it from this is about 4 hours afterwards, because there was a Black Lives Matter type meeting about healthcare, and Kaloni Bolton specifically, because from the Black community sees a very strong racial element in what happened to Kaloni Bolton. Whether that's true or not, there certainly is a lot of damn incompetence, and some people need to be held to account, because what happened to her is horrible. It shouldn't happen to anybody, and you can label that any way you want, but it's a failure of the system, and we'll be getting more into it as the slides go by. So yeah, I'll just okay. So now this woman, she's running as a socialist for something in Seattle. Her name escapes me. What piqued my interest is she's related to Salvador Allende, which kind of is a hero of mine. Back in 1973, I didn't like what happened to in Chile back then, and it kind of radicalized me, for life. And Yeah, so she gave a very good talk about, and she talked about, you know, maybe it was her uncle, I'm not sure, but Salvador, he was a doctor and he had done some very important work in public health. And so her contribution to the march was to relate what he had done, you know, in his, before he had become, you know, the leader of Chile and before he was deposed and, you know, dead. So yeah, let's move on to the next one and see what we have. Because I'm forgetting what I put all in this. Okay, now this was halfway down 4th Avenue. Here I am, you know, at the front looking back, because what they did is they stopped the march to have, you know, we had a street permit to do this, of course. You know, I mean, you know, this healthcare for all march is not exactly the most radical march. You know, it's pretty well behaved. But so we stopped and there were some stories told. One story I really want to relate because again, when we get into the Kaloni Bolton story, that we're really talking about is people falling through the cracks and not getting the care they need and the care they deserve, because it's a damn human right. And one particular, when we were stopped at the march, the story of a average couple was given, and the situation was the man worked, his particular job did not provide health care, but the woman also worked and they were raising a family, and that may be her, you know, talking to the crowd, or maybe her being introduced, I can't remember, but anyway, the story goes that she lost her job, so then the family was without health care. And then he had a widowmaker heart attack. And so she was given the choice, you know, do you want your husband to die, or would you want us to save him and be in debt for the rest of your life? For, you know, and so she said, well, let's save him, you know. And so that left them with over $100,000 in debt. They do not have health care now because they can't afford it. I mean, they're paying off $100,000 in debt. And the story, the importance of this story is that it can really happen to anybody, you know, unless you're amongst the elite and have the kind of money that, you know, we all wish we had, so we didn't have to worry about anything. You know, the normal people, you know, can get wiped out at any time. And, you know, the way our healthcare is right now, the story, the tragic story of this couple can happen to anyone. He had 2 serious heart attacks, you know, and so as soon as they got out of one, and so yeah, I think it's 100,000 in debt for each one. I'm not sure, you know, the details don't really matter as much. The point is the system's wrong, and it's just horribly broken. And so let's see what we have next.
You put this slide, I'm not sure how it's related.
This reminds me.
Yeah.
So as I'm waiting to march, you know, I got a couple flyers, and like, there's this one here. Now, this one I should really read. This is the official one from the march. It's very well written. I think I will in a minute. But this slide has to do with this flyer that somebody gave me. And it's kind of an amusing story, actually, because, you know, digressing a bit, I'm you know, enjoying doing this show, and I'm getting more into streaming and how you put all these things together and so on. So here I am on Tuesday night, and I'm playing with this brand new microphone, and I want to get into a Zoom meeting, and I remembered I got this flyer. I said, oh, I was going to check that out anyway, but you know, the idea is, I've been in a lot of Zoom meetings, so like some of you can join, and yeah, I could do what I want and get out. Nobody would notice, right? So, but this one, I Zoom in, and as soon as I do, somebody says hello, and so, you know, I couldn't actually just get out of there. But the thing is, I was going to check them out anyway, and I did not want to leave, I mean, what it was the radical socialists of Seattle, and they were talking about climate change. And the amusing part is I forgot what it was going to be, which is something I'm totally into. And so as soon as I was on the Zoom meeting, I'm looking at this is about climate change. I think I want to be here. And so for the next hour and a half, I ignored my family and was glued to my Zoom, and I had a great time with the comrades. Yeah, seriously. And it was very, very interesting. They are very well informed, and what the striking takeaway that I get from it is that they quite haven't put together yet that their socialism really is the answer to what we have to do, because we're talking about regulations and getting away from profit-driven decisions made by a small number of people. And you do that through democracy and, socialist things. And so it was very interesting to talk to them, and I'll be talking to them again for sure. Is a good thing. So that just one thing has kind of led to another by getting involved in M4A.
That's for sure.
So what do we have next year?
Well, I have an excerpt from the Newark, New Jersey march. There was a lady that gave personal witness. At the end of the march, there were some really eloquent speakers there as well. Again, this is available on Progressive Update. At the Progressive Update, the full stream, you can watch it there. But let's see this one, and then we'll talk about it. There we go.
Hello, my name is Maureen, and my oldest son was 28 years old. When he was 26, his insurance ended with Horizon because he turned 26. And I was still working. I had a job with the state of New Jersey as a public defender. And so then I continued him on insurance individually. I continued through Cobra. So I paid $750 a month for his insurance to continue. So now at the age of 28, I had been paying the insurance for 2 years. He developed a severe heroin addiction due to a few things that occurred in his life. And I sent him into a detox facility near our home in Somerset County. The detox facility said he needed to be there 5 to 7 days. After a day and a half, Horizon yanked him out and said, no, he can get treatment at home. He can go to outpatient. He has sober parents, which they didn't know if we were sober or not. How did they know? And he should just go to outpatient and live at home. So after they yanked him out, we brought him to another rehab up in Sussex County, northwest New Jersey. And they said, yeah, he should be here for 30 days. They put him in their detox section, even though Horizon wouldn't pay for that level of care. And then they put him into the regular section after several days. And after a week, again, of being at this facility, Horizon yanked him out again and said, no, he should just go home, be with his parents and go to outpatient. I had to go and get him after a week, put him on a plane to Florida because I found a place on the internet that said they would take him and accept whatever crumbs Horizon would pay. He goes down there, he's in their facility for 30 days. Then they send him, and Horizon pays them some, minimal amount. Then they send him to some sober home, which was nothing more than a flop house down in Florida. And he comes home in a body bag in 2016. And it was all due to Horizon, who I paid $750 a month for his insurance, not covering his
Honestly,
insurance.
we're not hearing her very well.
Back in 2008, there was a parity law that was passed indicating that mental health and addiction should be treated the same way as physical health problems. But Congress does not enforce that. Our politicians, our so-called leaders, do not enforce that parity law. And Horizon and other companies are able to get away with not covering what's in their policy. The policy said they covered addiction and they covered mental health, but they do not. They come up with these bogus reasons as to why it should not be covered. And why our Congress isn't having hearings about this, I don't know. Why they don't have hearings about the fentanyl that's pouring into our country, I don't know. I mean, they have other hearings about Trump, and that's fine. They have hearings about the riot that went on in the Capitol, and that's fine. But why not about, the drug addiction? 90,000 people died in 2020 from overdoses. The year my son died in 2016, 64,000 died. It went up to about 70,000 the following year, and up and up. Now it's up to 90,000 from 2020 because of the pandemic isolating everybody. And even less treatment is being provided than ever. So that's my personal story about why I think Medicare for All might have covered him. We wouldn't have to deal with a corrupt insurance company. And possibly parity would come into effect if we had that type of a system. And so that's my personal story. Thank you for listening.
So the reason I brought this up as opposed to someone talking about lack of insurance is that there is this myth propagated that I've heard from common folks that I've been talking to about Medicare for All, and they say, "Oh, but I have this Cadillac insurance. I don't want to lose my Cadillac insurance." And this is that's the big lie that's propagated, because there's no Cadillac insurance. At some point, people suffer these private insurance companies profit and gain calculations, and you may be lucky and not encounter this. But if you're like this lady, and this guy had full healthcare insurance, private healthcare insurance, and still they let him die because the calculation said that it would not make as much sense to invest in rehabilitating him as it's not profitable. So that's something that we have to counter, this argument that there is that the system is okay as it is. It is not. It is not okay as it is. People are dying because of the system. And that little girl died because of the system, because there's I myself am hesitant to go to the emergency room when something happens, because I know that if I go there and the insurance company deems it not being an emergency, and there's no way to qualify it as an emergency ahead of time, if I have like a pain that I suspect is something, turns out it's not, I could be charged for the entire emergency visit to the emergency room, which is inflated. So I myself go to the urgent care centers that often don't have even a doctor in them. If you're lucky, there is a doctor. At the very least, they're not. Other people there are not as well trained and as well regulated and inspected as are in hospitals. And this is why things like this happen. Do you want me to roll that clip about Kaloni?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, let's see. Oh, that's the image. Here is.
Yeah, there is a clip. I got it. I lifted it from Roar Media. This is it. Yeah.
Our brothers and sisters in Roar Media. Here we go.
Okay.
And I've got that
just
clip
play it
here. Let's watch it and just watch it and listen. Turn on the sounds.
Kaloni Bolton was a young, black, and gifted child, just 12 years old when she breathed her last breath on December 29th, 2020. She died trying to get much-needed medical help. Her sister saw her having an asthma attack, something that had troubled Kaloni from birth. She quickly took her to the urgent care in Renton, Washington, the Landing. Once they got there, the person at the front said, "We can't help you here. We don't have the stuff that can actually help you out, but maybe you can go to this other urgent care." No vitals were taken. There weren't any questions about, is this an emergency? Should we call 911? The professional staff didn't do any of that. They told her to go to another urgent care. So her sister drove her as quickly as she could to the Renton Highlands. And once they got to the Renton Highlands, they said, oh yeah, we can help, but you're gonna have to wait in line. What we need you to do is go back to your car and sit there and wait for our text message. That's what we need you to do. There wasn't any evaluation of what was happening at that moment. They understood that it was an asthma attack. They knew that a little girl was having difficulty breathing, and they had her wait. 10 minutes go by, 15 minutes go by, 20, 25 minutes go by, and eventually they get the text. Kaloni has had difficulty breathing the whole way through. By the time she actually gets into the clinic, she is clearly in a desperate state. The nurses start to put the oxygen on her face, but they're having trouble working it. It turns out it was empty. Kaloni's sister heard her sister pleading for help, saying her name over and over and over again, when the doctor and the nurse came back with a second oxygen bottle and mask. This time they had difficulty working it. They didn't know how to turn it correctly. They didn't do what they needed to do. Kaloni's eyes rolled to the back of her head. She started to turn purple. Her sister screamed and begged for help and finally said, call 911. Can somebody call 911? Eventually, she was taken from the North Benton Urgent Center in Renton, Washington, all the way over to Seattle Children's Hospital near the University of Washington, where it was determined that she was brain dead, and after 2 days on life support, she passed away.
Yeah, pretty tragic story. And I got that clip from Roar Media because it's almost exactly the way it was told to me by Ashley when I was in the crowd when she spoke at the rally. And to me, the situation is a failure of our system. It really is. And in a future slide coming up, I have a map, and I want to talk about a little bit of the logistics, because I actually go to the same clinics that Kaloni goes to. I have been to both clinics recently, in fact. So, and I've also been to Children's Hospital. I live in the area, and I want to talk about just how badly this thing was managed. And this particular slide has a web page where UW Medicine put out a press statement about the Kaloni Bolton investigation, and we will want to open that link and look at an itemized list of statements that they've made. But before we do that, I do want to show how this all worked out on the map, and which will be coming up. So we can come back to this slide, Amos. Yeah. Here we go. Okay. Now, I put some labels on this because I know I can't use my mouse to show you where things are. But on the left there, you can see Seattle. Now, notable about Seattle is we can have some very, very bad traffic at times because we're surrounded by water. That's a 7-mile wide Puget Sound, on the left there. And that's a very large lake on the right. It's about 20 miles long, and it's got a couple bridges, that are like 2 miles long across it. And my point in digressing about the topography of Seattle is it's very difficult to get around quickly from one place to another. And routing people through our roads can be, if you have a medical trouble, it could be the end of you. And so what I want to direct your attention to that island in the middle and drop down to, you'll see an arrow that says LUC. That stands for Landing Urgent Care, and that's where Kaloni was first taken. She had to wait in the car and all that, and it was the way it was described. And I can tell you, I've been to these clinics, and COVID, you would not believe the restrictions that they implemented, with the COVID thing. It's really hard to believe. I mean, they made you wait in your car. You couldn't go in. Only one person in the lobby at a time. And at the time this happened, everybody was afraid of getting COVID. And I think that's probably a part of the story that's not really, well, it should be brought out a little bit. This was a period, I'm not in it, and not to make any excuses for anything that happened, of course, but this is a time when things were really weird, trying to get even the simplest thing seen, medically was very difficult at that time, January, or, well, maybe it was a little earlier, but the point is, I'm telling you, these urgent clinics, they went really big on COVID restrictions, and that, I think, interfered with things. So they had Kaloni moved. They had her go to the second urgent care, which is down by the lowest arrow down there. And that one should say BUC, Benson Urgent Care. And that's about 5 miles from there, from LUC to BUC. It's about 5 miles. It'll take you about 10 minutes, depending on stoplights, which, because of our traffic, have been lengthened. And so it makes things hard to get around. You also are on some city roads that are, can slow you down. But, at least you can get there in 10 minutes. Now, moving Kaloni from, we'll get back to that slide about the UW website where they put out their statements. And the reason I wanted to put off getting back to that is because I really question the decision to move Kaloni to Children's Hospital. I'm doing this personally just because I know the topography, and I know a few things about Seattle and everything else here. In downtown Seattle, there's a place called Pill Hill. I put an arrow by that right there. There you can, I point at it and you can't see that. But, kind of in the middle left of the map, there's PH, and that's Pill Hill. There's about a dozen hospitals, and that's where the serious medical centers are in Seattle. And if you really wanted somebody in an emergency situation get medical care, I don't know why you would put another 10 miles and 15 minutes on the drive. Get her to Pill Hill, get her to Swedish, get her to all the other hospitals there with their great emergency rooms. And the fact that she's 12 years old should have had nothing to do with that decision. And now, when we get back to the statement put out by the University of Washington, that's what they're claiming. They're claiming that, she had to be taken there because they had the facilities to treat her. And, I'm saying that's bullshit. I'm saying that it was an economic decision made by the insurance companies, because basically all our healthcare is determined by insurance companies. We really don't have any say. And the doctors don't even have much say. You go to a doctor's appointment, you're not allowed to say, I came in here because I cut my arm open, but I've been feeling this thing, and there's this kind of bulge sticking out of my left side. Can I talk to you about that? No, sir, you'll have to make an appointment about that. It's all choreographed by the powers that be. And, we need to take control of it. It's a human right. I mean, we need quality health care. And it's a known fact. America, we pay twice as much and we get half the care, and that's because there's the way it's set up. So, yeah. So enough about the map. I've been to these urgent cares. I know how they run. Sometimes I've gotten very good service there, very good care, and also at times it can be horrible. It depends on the personalities, how much they're being overworked. But the fact is, getting back to the insurance companies again, they're always trying to save money. So do you think these things were staffed up because COVID came along and the restrictions got in the way and say, hey, maybe we need to bring on a few other people for a while because all these COVID restrictions are really interfering with our ability to take care of our people? Was that decision made? Of course not. That would interfere with the bottom line. And, the bottom line is all that's important until we change things. And to do that, we need to double the number of people we have at our next march. Okay. So, Yeah, let's get back to that website. Oh, this is another one. We can come back to this one if you want to extend the show. I mean, I'm sure we'll be going over, but yeah, this one is a great tape about the Delta 9 and COVID. And I'm thinking, Amos, you and Marcus and I agree. We believe in medicine and science, and one thing that really bothers me, amongst the progressive community right now is too much attention's being paid to pseudoscience, and the garbage that's there. There are a number of individuals that are claiming that came from a lab, and all sorts of weird things, and using of all things patent applications to try to prove something. Now, if you've ever filed for a patent, and I have, by the way, and I've also been granted one, patents are not an instrument of science. They are a legal device, and they are flawed as shit. So you're not going to prove anything by going to patent applications. And I also know that, basically the patent I have, I was working for a guy, I mentioned this idea I had to the owner of the company I was working for, and he thought it was great. And he ran out and got a patent on it and gave me my $10 for it. And, it exposed me to the whole game, and industries are always patenting everything. And here I'm just telling you that there's a cadre of fools. Well, they're not fools, but they're getting a lot of disciples who, it's horrible. It's pseudoscience. It's I think at one time. Yeah, go ahead, Amos. You can go ahead and interrupt me.
I agree. I was watching the other day. I was watching Jimmy Dore going after Fauci, and I don't think that he understands what he's talking about. The whole idea of Rand Paul going after him was to like somehow implicate that that they had to do with the creation of this virus, which is completely unfounded and ridiculous claim. But however, he accuses Fauci for doing a play of words. In fact, it's the opposite. But I don't know if he's that clueless, or if he's promoting it for a political purpose. I just really don't understand that. I don't know why. It doesn't help anything either way. It doesn't make the virus less threatening or less dangerous, or the need to take vaccines any less important. So I really don't know. I don't know why they're getting locked into this false narrative, and it's just frankly very disappointing.
Oh, totally. Yeah, we should definitely play this then, because this is the message I want people to see. But yeah, it's terrible that people are so misinformed about things, and they're not understanding that there are people who are taking advantage of this and for their own reasons.
Right. Do you want me to play then?
Yeah, go ahead, play it.
All right.
Yeah, when I saw this, I sent it to my wife.
What we've noticed is that the Delta variant is about 1,000 times higher amount of virus in people's nose than the initial variant that we saw back in February and March of 2020. And so that means there's a lot more virus being spread out, and that also means that it is much more easily transmitted. If everybody had been vaccinated, this may have been totally averted, but given the fact that it has not been such, what we have to do is start putting up the same barriers that helped us cut things down, so-called non-pharmacologic interventions for addressing COVID transmission. To be honest, I never stopped wearing a mask in a grocery store. Because I've never trusted that everybody not masked is truly vaccinated. And so I believe that we're back to, if you go grocery shopping, you got to mask up. If you're outdoors, you probably still can get away without masking. But anything indoors where you're not within your own little bubble of people who you know are vaccinated and are part of your family, you have to mask up. I think for the general public, because most people are not fit tested, their N95s don't necessarily work like N95s anyhow. And I think for the general public, unless you're going to be in very intense circumstances, wearing a surgical mask should be more than adequate, or wearing a good cloth mask that fits well, particularly cloth masks that actually have these filters on the inside of them. Every time the virus multiplies, it mutates. And every time it mutates, if the mutation is beneficial to the virus, then it gets carried forward. So Delta isn't going to be the last variant. And that is in large part on the unvaccinated community, who are helping to generate all these variants, which will make it more and more difficult to control the pandemic. People keep saying, I don't know whether it's safe or not. There are 150 million people who have been vaccinated. The number of severe illness signals are minimal. This is a safe vaccine, and it works. We felt like we were close to the end, and now we're right back in the soup again. It's maddening. I think the one take-home message is, if anybody ever wants this pandemic to end, they got to get vaccinated. And if they have questions, there are plenty of people who can answer questions. This is the way out of the pandemic. We have to get the population immune, right? You know, when people talked about getting herd immunity with the older strains of virus, maybe 70% would have been good enough. But now we're looking at a strain that's much more transmissible, and we have to get up into the 80s, maybe as high as 90% to really get herd immunity. For all the people who don't like wearing masks and who find all this intervention annoying, get a vaccine. That's the way you get done with all this stuff.
Yeah. You know, 150, he said in the tape there, 150 million people have been vaccinated. You know, and there's this fool named Robert Malone out about right now, and he's pushing the notion that, you know, vaccines are very, very dangerous to a certain age group of young men and so on. And, you know, so I found out about him, and I did a little research, and I quickly found out he's full of shit, because the fact is the cases of this heart condition that's supposedly showing up by these vaccinations is lost in the noise. We're talking about 5 cases in a million. And you can't even, you know, and I was looking real hard, because one thing I wanted to find out was, okay, if it's 5 cases in a million now, what was it before? Was it 4, 5, 7, 3, 1? Could not find that answer. You know, and that's really interesting that, you know, they put out the info that, you know, they want you to know, and they hide the rest. And the same people accuse, you know, our medical professionals of withholding data, which is the most ridiculous idea. I can't even imagine that. A medical professional, you know, withholding research data from another medical professional. Yeah, you know, in terms of NDAs, and you work for this company and that company, but basically, no, you're talking about men of science who are working together, and you know, if you don't show me mine, I won't show me you. You know, it's a reciprocal thing, and you know, when people say something like that, that just shows they're taking advantage of people who don't know how the world works. Yeah, you know, I have to say it.
Yeah, I believe we try to do our best here on the show, giving you predictions and information as soon as we kind of read it between in the tea leaves from findings in Israel and so forth, and we did predict that we would be getting back to masking and to all these good things. Unfortunately, and there's more and more information coming that suggests that 20%, for example, information from Israel pointing out that 20% of those who are vaccinated and do get the breakthrough COVID, 20% of those people actually get long-term effects. So even if you're not going to be hospitalized, which is less likely, you're like 91%, I believe, protected from being hospitalized or suffering death from the Delta variant. If you're vaccinated, you still could get long-term effect, and that includes things like myocarditis and breathing issues and all kinds of nice treats. So there's still all the reason to be masked and to take precautions and start rethinking our newfound freedom, so to speak. I think we're not there yet. We have to rethink all of this. The sad part of it is that the new variant Delta and some of the other variants, and probably I and others expect that future variants are going to focus much more on younger age of people. So far the COVID has spared children, but that is a hugely untapped population for transmission of the disease. So naturally it would stand to reason that is going to be where the virus is mutates next. So we will have a huge number of child victims that are going to be suffering this as opposed to up to now. So,
the thing is, nobody knows. Nobody knows what's going to happen. And I've known this I've known that nobody knows all along. And viruses mutate. The particular mutation that occurred in England was a more deadly virus, but it wasn't as contagious. So that one has been replaced by the Delta, which is fortunately no more deadly than the Alpha, but much more contagious, and that's why it's around. And in this tape we just watched, one phrase I sticks in my head is non-pharmacological interventions. That is the way I believe things should have been done all along. I wanted things done so that vaccines were a backup, that they would only be used if absolutely necessary, which is our case, by the way. And that human reason and people behaving as adults, instead of screaming about freedom, which only shows me they don't even understand what freedom is, basically murdering people. If you're passing on a disease that maybe made you sick, and you pass it on and made somebody else sick, and then they pass it on and killed somebody, guess what? You are in that chain. And so sleep with that. You who felt it was an infringement to put a piece of cloth on your damn face, that you can actually be walking down the street. If you catch COVID and later on you might be fine, but you may have passed it on and killed somebody, and I'm saying it. I haven't heard anybody else say it. And I think it's about time it gets said that, ignorance is murdering people. And we have a number of people, they put on suits, they wear bow ties, they flash some academic credentials, which may or may not relate to the subject at hand, and basically think that, what they say is their right to say it, and I'll rant a little bit about that too. You see, what's going on right now in a lot of the, say, leftish liberal community is that, these people, we have to, there's censorship going on, and I've experienced censorship. I have my own website. I know that there's censorship going on. I actually have known it for a few years. But, I don't think what's going on with COVID is censorship. I'm going to put this outrageous statement. I know I'm going to get a lot of people mad at me right now by saying this. But, if you scream fire in a crowded theater, guess what? That's not free speech. You are endangering people. You don't have the right to vibrate the molecules of air in the room when you are endangering people. And what's going now in what people are calling censorship is very deliberate. It's targeted. It's targeted against specific ignorance that can be identified. It's not like, oh, I'm going to censor you or I'm going to censor you. One thing, a number of channels, have had shows pulled on YouTube, and we've had our shows pulled too. And I'm no fan of what YouTube does at all. But, there are a number of people who've been complaining about shows getting pulled on their show this week, and there's this rampant censorship, and we can't say what we want to say. Well, guess what? You kind of forgot that you put on that tape with that guy with the bow tie, which I did not do, by the way, because I want the show to be seen, And if I did put on that the show with the guy with the bow tie, I would expect correctly that this show, be suppressed, because this is misinformation. This is taking advantage of ignorance. It's perpetuating ignorance, and it's perpetuating pain and suffering, and we got to get past this. We got to get organized and get past this pandemic. We have to solve all our other problems. We're getting stuck, and we're getting stuck by people, since I'm ranting about this, I'll tell you, months ago, I had a problem with Brett Weinstein. Now, I happen to be, or was, kind of still am in a way, a Brett Weinstein fan. I didn't like what happened to him at Evergreen, college and all that. But, at the beginning of the pandemic, he has some, credentials, doing some research as a student or something with something to do with the virus. Anyway, so he comes out with this, that it came from a lab thing. And, I think what he did was really irresponsible. You're putting out this stuff without any scientific background, just because you think it may have happened this way, because you have a certain background that suggests it might have happened that way, and putting it out there basically as fact. Because, a few years ago, I kind of changed an attitude. And my attitude had been that basically, if you had an opinion, you should just get it out there and say it, and just, get it out there. Right. And then I had a sad realization that, sometimes people put things out that the vast majority of the public really can't understand, or they take it with a certain bias. And so whatever clever, things I might see, they're not seen, and an example of there's a particular individual that, basically is spreading the rumor that we're all going to cook next year. Every year it's next year, the climate change is going to, burn us all up. And if you had been listening to him, believed him, we should have been burned about 10 years ago. But, he's still out there. He's still putting out his message. He's still getting followers. But, and at one time, I was kind of a fan of him in the sense that, hey, and I went and saw him in person. You're putting out a message. You're making people think. That's where I was coming from. Then I realized you're putting out a message and people aren't thinking. And it went from, I'm okay with what you do, to don't do it. Don't do it anymore. So,
Right. As to that claim of the lab leak, there's really at this point, there's no evidence, there's no conclusionary data. Most experts believe it would not have been possible looking at the genetic codes. But it's not completely impossible that happened. If it happened, it's not something that was intentional. Apparently, if it did happen, but there's really no evidence. There's no conclusion as to where that virus came from. There's a possibility it came from a previous mine expedition where they retracted some viruses, and there was a virus, one of which varieties resembled to some degree the one that we had initially. I don't know. We can cover that maybe in the future, but it certainly doesn't change anything. So
yeah, well, I'll put out one perspective I have on that quickly, and that is I look at those kind of questions from a mathematical point of view as well. And one thing I see is a lot of these things are only looked at with a black and white thing, but I actually look at, okay, there are a finite number of labs. The ways it can get into the environment are kind of, there are a lot of them, but they're smaller than the number of caves in the world containing bats. You know, the real world the natural world is interacting with us continually and never stops. And just from a mathematical point of view, the odds of it coming from a lab versus, it changing a protein and suddenly becoming very infectious in humans and a bat sneeze near us, to me, I look at the math, and I don't see that the lab makes much sense. The lab,
Yeah, it's still an open question as far as absolute confirmation is concerned, for or against. But either way, it doesn't change. Like I said, it doesn't change anything.
That's right. It doesn't, and I agree. It is an open question, and but one thing that's aggravated me is all this talk kind of has taken away the point off of what we should be doing, which is wearing a mask, acting responsibly, and getting this thing behind us.
Yep. So we agree about that. Regarding the March, I just wanted to bring up, going back to the March, there's people who've been complaining recently that the progressive demonstrations were in front of, so to speak, progressive politicians' offices, and it totally does make sense. It's not directed at Manchin, although I wouldn't mind protesting against him either. But it does make sense to protest in front of people who made a promise and got into office based on these promises, and whose constituency is supporting those things, rather than in front of Manchin, whose constituency is not particularly concerned about healthcare or whatever we may be promoting. So it's not it's totally justified in my view to do so and mount the pressure. And I'm concerned looking at for example AOC's position. I'm very willing to give people the benefit of the doubt, especially with politicians, with all the knowledge that they have to maneuver around and strategize, and we may not know all the details. However, these people have not even done as much as tweet in favor or spoken at those rallies, and that's kind of disheartening. And it goes to a bigger issue of trust and once you lose the confidence of your constituents, it's very, very difficult to regain it. I don't think mostly it's not reversible. So if they don't notice that they're going the wrong way with that and losing support along the way, they're going to find themselves out of office. Maybe somebody more centrist and conservative is going to take their place, which would be a shame. However, I don't think they should feel confident about their position at all, and they should consider that before they ignore what's going on on the ground.
Well, yeah, Congresswoman Jayapal, sent a message that was read on the stage at the Seattle March, And that was really nice that she sent a statement. It would have been much nicer if she had been there. Right. And, you know, Cori Bush did the same thing in New York.
Yes, she came.
Same story.
And she participated in she didn't speak at the rally, but she was present at the DC rally, I believe.
Congresswoman Jayapal, I recall it actually came out. There was a pre-recorded statement, and she apologized for not being able to be there.
Right.
You know, having whatever, you know, since we don't know what she was doing, maybe it was more important. We can't say, but we do know that she wasn't there.
Right. Okay. Let's go into the cartoons. We have some for this week here. They, as you know, there was the hearing about January 6th was the first hearing was live on TV, but they're continuing to discuss that. Here's the GOP Law and Order guide. So the one protesting for the rights to vote is arrested and detained, and the guy who's protesting at the Congress and surging is a peaceful tourist and released immediately. Well, we know it wasn't released immediately, but nevertheless, the point is taken. You want to do this one?
I can't see it. See it very well. Let's see. We're coming for you. Let's have trial by combat. If you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. Whatever happened, it was all Nancy Pelosi's fault. Joe, January 6th committee.
Of course it was. Yeah, we all know it's Pelosi's fault. And here's the planting of the flags. Police planting the U.S. flag, and McCarthy planting the Trump flag, and all the guys behind him with the Confederate. Sadly.
Yeah.
Yep. I am among those who believes that it's definitely necessary to go through this, because there's a huge portion of the public who still thinks that was okay, or that thinks that they were in the right, or that the reasons for the rioting were right, and buy into the election fraud. And I'm not sparing. There's some progressives among those who still keep perpetuating that unsubstantiated lie, and that's a shame. Capitol insurrection hearings. The Justice Department says Trump officials can be called to testify, and we see the guy here in the fire suit. It says for when pants burst into flames.
Yeah, it's important to have the stuff brought out. It was hard to. I saw a little bit of it. It was hard to watch the officers testifying. You know, and what happened. It was very good. They brought that out, because we get the idea that this crowd was somewhat like jovial or something, and these officers testifying will let you know that some of these people in this crowd had murder in their eyes. You know, and there definitely has to be accountability.
And not just personal accountability, because they'll only catch a fraction of those people that were really ready to do whatever necessary to restore Trump into power. It's clearly important to get to the bottom of this and make sure that this can't happen again.
Yep.
Otherwise, we're in trouble. And here's the guy watching Fox News on like a VR set, and he says, "There was love."
That's an oxymoron right there.
There was love in the air at the Capitol on January 6th. It was all people's fault, the Pelosi's fault anyway. This is awesome. I can choose my own reality.
Fox reality. I love it.
Yes. And here's a Republican saying, if you can't beat them, don't let them vote.
Yeah. I can't read that.
Joe Biden's wrong. I'm not suppressing voting rights. I'm defending the red, white, and blue.
Yeah.
Well, and then on the COVID front, here's many of our COVID relatives. Many of our COVID relatives had underlying conditions. They were poor, black, and they were nursing home residents. Yep. And here's the heroes of the pandemic trying to erect the United States flag, and the anti-vaxxers pulling it down at the same time.
I think that's my favorite one of the deck.
Yeah. And here's I know the ethics are questionable, but it was the only way we could appeal to the unvaccinated. And there's a big poster of the MAGA brand, Patriot Juice, freedom enhancing supplement, bigger, stronger, more patriotic.
But Amos, the thing is, that's all true.
Yep. And here comes the one with the guy removes the mask and says, "Woohoo, I can finally take this mask off and breathe some fresh air." And then he inhales the wildfire smoke. And we have Biden putting a flower in the filibuster gun.
It looks real effective.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Here's China's prime saying, "We don't hold intellectual property for ransom. We steal it."
Well, it kind of depends on your definition of stealing sometimes.
And here's the final one. And it says, in a perfect world, new dress code for Olympics executives who set rules for what women athletes must wear. And this is in regards to the Olympics, where women were fined for not wearing female attire as the Olympics executives demanded. So I think that's become more of like an international thing now, like an incident. And who was that said that she would pay the fines? I don't remember who, a singer or someone high profile said that they would pay the fines related to that. So
that, I don't know this story. That all blew by me.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely the Japanese dealing with COVID is turning out to be catastrophic. The country is plunging into a spiral of pandemic, and I think that they're trying to deny that the Olympics had anything to do with it. The fact is that it may have to some degree. We don't know to what extent, but either way, it's going to endanger all the people that are staffing the Olympics and the athletes. So bad decision, just for money, and I suspect that the politicians are going to pay for this with their political careers, as they should. And this brings us to the end. We have an end song, which is the same band that I played. By the way, did you last outro, did you notice who was embedded in it?
Yes, but I had to play it back. It was there's that, where the monkey walks, they have an ape walking through, people playing a ball, and people never see the ape. It was like that. I watched the whole thing, and then when I rewatched it, I saw you, and then you were all over the place. I could not saw, So it was interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad fun. You had a good time. It was good to see you. Yeah.
It was a lot of fun and a very creative and fun group of people. They just came up with another single, which we're gonna go out to. And it's called Ara acondicionados, which means air conditioning. And here we go. Bye, guys, and keep sharing. We're going to see you in a week. If you wondered where Marcus was, unfortunately, his aunt is not doing very well, and he had to take care of her. Go and do that. So we're wishing him and his aunt the best and good recovery. I'm gonna hold our fingers crossed. So we will all see you hopefully a week from now. Bye. Bye, Keith.
Bye.